Welcome to Tales Told When the Windows Rattle. I'm Tim Prossel. As I was combining various ghost stories found in Victorian publications, I noticed that two of them, though published in England and Ireland, are set in Germany. So that's our focus this time, tales of ghosts that lurk in Germany. The first one comes from an article titled Fact or Fancy. It's written by G.C. Swain, and it was published in Once a Week in 1866. Now, before I begin, I should point out that there's a reference to a Lord Byron poem. It's titled Parisina, and it involves a character who has an affair with her illegitimate stepson. Quite the scandal. To the question whether I have ever seen a ghost, I should answer no. But I know someone who has, that is to say, who fully believes that he has seen one. Here is the story just as it was told to me. Near the town of Weimar in Saxony, on the right of the long alley planted with chestnuts that leads from the town up to the summer palace of the Grand Duke at Belvedere, there is a spot bare of trees, showing the site of some ancient building, the ruins of which have almost entirely disappeared. Near this site, among the brushwood, are openings to a most extraordinary series of subterranean passages, which, it is said, have never been thoroughly explored. Some say that human bones have been found in them, others that persons endeavoring to explore them without a clue have become bewildered and perished of hunger. Some attribute them to human hands, and some to natural geological causes. It is only certain that they are there, and that no one is able to give any definite account of them. As to the building, whose foundations alone are visible among the bushes, it is said to have been an ancient castle belonging to some former dukes of Saxony. Some few years ago, a friend of mine, Herr H. of Weimar, was in the habit of making frequent visits to Oberwiesma, a village at the end of the park, one of the ways to which lies through the Belvedere Allee. One evening in October, after the sun was set, he was passing along this road in a thick fog, illuminated by the moon. As he passed the spot where the ancient castle formerly stood, he was aware of an appearance in the mist beside him, which he at first did not pay much attention to, as he thought it might be the reflection of his own form. After a while, however, it struck him that the image which followed his steps so closely was accompanied by the image of a dog, and he had no dog with him. This circumstance caused him to stop and look at the figure, when, to his horror, he observed that it wanted a head. Herr H. walked towards it. It retired. He ran from it. It followed him. He fell into his usual pace. It continued to keep step with him. He addressed it, but it did not answer. Herr H. is a Roman Catholic. In mortal terror, he mechanically made the sign of the cross. The ghost immediately vanished in the direction of the remains of the castle. There is an old tradition connected with the scene of this adventure, that a former Duke of Saxony caused his son to be beheaded for some fearful family crime, either the murder of his own mother or an intrigue similar to that which forms the foundation of Lord Byron's Parisina. At Berka, a small bathing place among the hills, 7 miles from Weimar, there is also to be seen on a woody knoll the site of a ruined castle from which the Grand Duke of Weimar I derives his title of Count Berka. The old people of Berka still talk of a headless apparition which used to haunt it, and which often appeared to their grandfathers. There is a rich tradition of headless ghosts, headless royalty, headless train accident victims, headless horsemen, headless horses. One day, yes, one day I will put together a collection of headless ghost stories. They're pretty great. But before I do that, let me read you this. This comes from an anonymous article titled Fireside Horrors for Christmas. It was published in the Dublin University magazine in 1847. Now, this article refers to 3 men Gottlieb Schubert, Justinus Kerner, and Adam Eschenmayer, they were all German physicians who were exploring clairvoyance and early forms of hypnotism. They might have called it animal magnetism, whatever the German translation of that is. Some years ago, when traveling in Germany, it was our fortune to make the acquaintance of a Roman Catholic clergyman who was the subject of a most strange and frightful spiritual visitation. In the year 1838, he had been appointed to a village parish and entered upon his work with an ardor that distinguished him in all his pursuits. The first night that he spent in his own residence, he could not sleep. Hour after hour he lay tossing on his restless bed and rose in the morning without having closed an eye. He attributed this, however, to the excitement of his spirits, the unfamiliar bed, the fatigue of the journey, in short, to any cause but what proved to be the true one. The second night came, and he rested no better. The third and the fourth equally failed to bring him repose. He changed his hour of going to bed, worked hard during the day, did everything possible to win sleep to his pillow, but in vain. It might be on the 7th or the 8th night that he felt, as he lay feverishly turning from side to side, something sitting, as he thought, on the side of his bed. He sat up, groped with his hand over the bed coverings to the place where the pressure seemed to be, and was sensible of something that yielded to a push, but immediately after returned to its former place. He got up and lighted a candle. There was nothing to be seen on the bed, nothing to be found in the room that could have been the cause of his sensations. He lay down again, leaving the light burning, and now a superstitious awe stole over him when he felt the weight on the bedside as before, while his eyes assured him that nothing visible occupied the place. Of sleep there was now no hope, and not only for that night, but for many following, till the health of the man, thus at once deprived of his natural rest and pursued by the terrors of an invisible world, began perceptibly to give way. This had gone on for about a fortnight, when he began to see something. It was the shape of a woman veiled from head to foot, as it seemed, in a gray mist, sitting on the bed. The haunted man began to fear for his reason. He wrote to Schubert, to Dr. Kerner, to Professor Eschenmayer, to everyone he had heard of as being versed in the secrets of psychology. He detailed his sufferings. He supplicated help. As might be expected, the correspondence had no result but that of rendering the case more hopeless. The sufferer traveled from one master of the mystic science to another, and it was while on a visit to Schubert that he became acquainted with him. Of course, all that could be done for him was done, and this amounted to just nothing. He returned in despair to his parish. To put the reality of the apparition to a new test, he spoke to it. It answered. He related this to his friends. They smiled and said his poetical temperament was carrying him too far. More than one said, "Send your specter to me. If there be anything in her, I'll find it out." He promised to do so and kept his promise. Sleep, so long a stranger, revisited his bed. But the next morning the rash inviter was sure to come and say one visit was enough for him. A second such night would drive him frantic. The niece of the clergyman, who was his housekeeper, a good-hearted and religious girl, heard of this and begged her uncle to send her the apparition. He did it from time to time to have a night's sleep. The phantom lady, in all her visits to others, kept silence. No one but the clergyman ever heard her speak, perhaps because no one else had found the courage to speak to her. But what she said to him he could never be induced to tell. So stood the matter when we were brought into contact with him. For aught we know, it stands to this hour. From other sources, we have learned that he often passes his night in the open air to evade the dreaded visitation, unwilling to lay too heavy a tax on the self-sacrificing affections of his niece. Such times his village parishioners often lie awake till dawn, listening with a heart-clutching fear to the unearthly tones which his voice and his guitar conspire to send forth into the shuddering night. As a man who suffers from insomnia, I respond very deeply to this story. First of all, I don't know what to do with the idea that this clergyman is able to tell the ghost to go haunt somebody else for a night. I need some sleep. Please, go haunt my niece. I've never run across that in any other ghost story. Now, the part about the ghost having weight and able to make a dent in the bed, let me tell you about the experience of my wife. We were staying at a bed and breakfast in Maine. We were in bed, the lights were off, and she felt a cat jump up on the bed and settle itself near our feet. Turned the lights back on, and sure enough, there was no physical cat around. We were tempted to ask the B&B hostess if they had a pet that had passed away, but we really liked the place and we were planning on going back. In fact, we have gone back, so we didn't want to be remembered as those weirdos who complained about the phantom cat. So we never really explored it, but I have a hunch that other people have had this experience, especially pet owners who have lost a pet. Still, this story is something else. This is a human being sitting on the end of the bed, which is, admittedly, a little bit creepier. I've got quite a bit of time left over, so I want to read you one more thing. It really has nothing to do with Germany. It's not a ghost story. In fact, it comes from a piece of fiction. It's a short story titled A Tale for a Winter Fireside, but I just think it's a very nice little snapshot of what went on in Victorian times. This comes from Deutsches Western Counties Illustrated Annual, published in 1883. And in the story, the family of a large household has gone off visiting, leaving the staff behind. As the servants all gathered round the great fire in the kitchen for an hour or so before going to bed, the talk fell upon ghosts and visitations from the world of spirits, and each one had some ghostly experience of their own to recount, or that of a particular friend. As each told his or her tale, a delightful shiver thrilled them all, and involuntary and half-fearful looks were cast behind, as if some restless creature from another world was expected to step into the warm brightness from the outside cold and snow. There is nothing like ghost stories for a winter fireside, especially when there are sufficient in number of the company to strengthen courage. A pleasurable feeling pervades the whole body and even goes tingling to the fingers' ends. And if the thought intrudes of a dark staircase and a lonely bed, it only heightens the fearful pleasure. I put together a website that is designed to reintroduce this interesting, strange, but wonderful tradition. You can find it at ghostlyhearthside.wordpress.com. I provide PDF files for all of the ghost stories that I've been reading on this season of Tales Told. There are a few other things for you to take a look at, such as the history of the custom itself. Once again, that website is ghostlyhearthside.wordpress.com. I'm Tim Prossel. Thank you very much for listening.